Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it, especially late at night for you. Well, maybe not late, but it sounds late to me. So thanks for making
It's a
the
bit
time.
late. It's all right though. Yeah.
What have you been up to today? Are you getting ready for some races? Are you on a little downtime or?
Yeah, so I've just come back from I did rest week last week. But I went on sort of on holiday with my girlfriend. She came over to France and we went to Chamonix and
Okay.
yeah, I did that. Spent a bit of time doing some hikes and some off the bike stuff. And then I've just come back to Aix today, which is where I'm based for training and that. Well, Aix. I did my first ride yesterday, first proper ride yesterday, and then today some efforts and yeah, had some of the British teammates over this afternoon at the house just to yeah have fun.
Very
Yeah,
cool. How often do you take a break during the season like that to just get off the bike and do something else for a few days?
I'd say unfortunately across the time I've been racing, it's normally by the time I've been able to say I think it's good to have a rest, I've ended up having to have like a forced rest. So
Um,
that say being ill or having a crash or something. But this is the first time in a little while where I've been able to sit down, just take a step back and really enjoy the rest for what it is.
cool.
I think like two or three times this year I've ended up either having like food poisoning and having to have a week off or just being ill or bad crash, then you sort of
Yeah.
can't afford to then add extra days onto that. But yeah.
It's tough then because like you didn't really rest. You're like recovering from the illness, but you're like, dude, I
Exactly.
gotta get back to training. It's so funny.
Yeah.
I just had this conversation with a guy. He does a lot of gravel, a lot of backpacking, and he did him and his buddy did 25 hours in 3 days. They just go off into the woods and like crush. I'm
Crikey.
like, dude, okay, so Monday, Tuesday, you're gonna be pretty wasted. Like Wednesday, maybe ride. And he's like, well, I think this
Yeah.
this can be just my rest week, right? I'm like, no, no, like you're like way in the hole. This isn't
Yeah.
really normal recovery. So yeah, it's interesting with a lot of like gravel athletes that just people are doing some crazy hours and crazy rides that uh yeah, just the recovery is a whole different ball game. It's kind of wild.
Yeah. I
But
can't imagine it really. I look at some of the races are like 10 hours long. It's just
these
mental.
guys, shout out to Abe and Ramsey. These guys do 40-hour no sleeping races, and I don't know how they do it. It's
Yeah.
I when I first met them, I looked at their Strava and I was like, oh, this is one bike ride. They're like, oh yeah, it was a
Mm.
race. We didn't sleep. I was like, oh my god,
That's crazy.
it's crazy. I don't even know how they physically do it, but
Yeah.
anyways. Well, yeah, let's jump into this. I think one of the most general kind of biggest questions, how do you look at the phases of training? I think a lot of us have read about, do base training, you have a build phase, you go into races, but the more pros I talk to, the more guys and girls in your shoes, you don't always know your schedule. It's like you're traveling a lot. How do you, as you're going into the season, what's ideal? How do you like to prepare for the year ahead?
I think for me, it's always good to have some big goals in
Mm,
mind. Some key points in the season where you want to say, like, at this point, I really want to be going well. Then it's also good to have little goals along the way that sort of keep you motivated, but also means you've got something, you're not putting your whole mind and focus on like one thing.
mm,
And I think that can become quite stressful. I think for me, I've always thought that having a real good solid winter, real solid build up into the year has been beneficial. And I really enjoy the training in winter where you've not really got any travel or racing. You just pure getting the miles in, doing a bit of gym, bit of efforts, but it's mostly like just solid training.
mhm.
Um, and then I think as long as you get that real good block in, say December, January, that can set you up for at least the first half of the season.
Mm.
And then from there, it's yeah, just about sort of tailoring your sessions to the races that you've got, like the specific demands of that race.
Mm. What do you, when you're doing that, like base, that winter training, you just doing a lot of endurance? You mentioned like a couple efforts. Do you just kind of shoot for hours? What's sort of your main goal there?
Yeah, so well, it's quite tricky. I've got a coach that coaches me. He's coached me since I was 14, and I think
Awesome.
we've both agreed that I respond really well to endurance. Just like long rides where not necessarily going easy, but like a solid zone two, mid to upper zone two. Because I think in the winter when you've not got the fatigue from racing, you can afford to like really push on in that zone. I think
Mm.
when it's cold and wet, it sort of gives you something to focus on as well, just like chipping away at the power. Um, and yeah, that so mainly like time on the bike, but also time in the gym and a little bit of efforts here and there as you come as you start coming out of winter.
What are you doing in the gym?
I think this year was the first year where I didn't really do much on my legs at all. So it was more just like upper body, core, really building like a strong, all the muscles that help you put power down on the bike, but not necessarily the legs, because I think for me, I find if I do too much on the legs, then I end up feeling it too much on the bike, and then it
Mm.
sort of makes me feel almost more tired than I actually am. Because I don't think soreness really relates to. There's a difference between soreness and tiredness, and the gym can make you mega sore, and it can trick you into thinking that you're probably more tired than you actually are because of how sore it makes your legs.
Mm. Also, just the neuromuscular strain, like it is so different
Yeah,
than the big. If I lift too much, it's like someone takes a pill and smashes you in the face 3 hours later. I'm just like, whoa, I'm exhausted. But it's not,
yeah,
I don't get that feeling from a 6 hour bike ride. That's a different tired. Yeah,
yeah.
it's definitely tough to manage that. That's interesting that you do the arm more arms. So you doing like what's your upper body stuff that you focus on?
Yeah, a little bit of bent over rowing. Um, some quite crikey, it's hard to remember now. It's been so long since I was doing it. But
So you do it just in the winter, not during the season at
yeah,
all.
yeah, just in the winter. And then bit of upright row, and then like the real core stuff, bit of band work,
Mm,
which I try and implement that as well into like a weekly routine now. There's stuff that I can do without needing the gym. But
mm.
I think it's in the winter. I like, even if you don't necessarily need a gym to do it, it's nice to go to the gym to do it because it sort of makes you focus a bit more. Yeah,
I'm into that. When you were talking about doing the middle high endurance, you're doing it by power. Do you guys ever look at heart rate or RPE, or you stick pretty much to power for your training?
yeah. I quite like to go off. Yeah, either power or RPE because I think yeah, but it's tricky because I say I like to go off RPE, but it's more a case of I'll go off power until I feel like the body's like not responding at all,
There's like
and
a
then I'll look
mismatch,
at my
like the
heart rate.
RP and the power
Yeah,
are disagreeing. Yeah.
yeah, and then I'll take a choice from there, and I'll speak to my coach Roy Chamberlain, and then we'll sort of make a decision. But generally, I think because you're never really going mega deep in the winter, then I think you
Mhm.
can afford to just go for power.
Mm, cool. You had mentioned having some small goals going into the year along with the big goals. What are going on that a little bit? What are some of the small goals that you might set? Are those smaller races? Are those metric based? What types of goals are you looking for to kind of get you to the big goal of the big race?
Yeah, so I think yeah, for me personally this year, so I had the big goal was to do really well in the first few races of the year, and then call that a bit of a peak, and then come down, not necessarily come down, but then sort of reset after that first like month or two, and then go into the races in sort of August, September, uh, with it again another peak. But along the way, having sort of points where I want to be, say either at a certain weight or hitting a certain number. So for me, like my big goal, my first big goal of the year was to just do really well in the first like three weeks of the year. Um, and along the way to that, I sort of knew I wanted to be hitting certain numbers in training
Mm,
before it, but not stress too much on that because I think there's a big difference between numbers in training and racing. But
totally.
yeah,
What's the what type of, I'm not not asking specific numbers, but are you looking for like, I want to do this many watts over a 10-minute interval, 5-minute interval, 90-second power? What's really important to you in your racing?
yeah, I think for me, my favorite thing to use comparatively is I do a lot of VO2 max sessions,
Mm,
and I've been living in the same place for 4 years now, and I pretty much always use the same climb or one or two climbs, so I know I can look back at the previous 4 years, and I know that if I'm getting a certain distance up the hill in those 4 minutes,
mm,
then I'm going pretty well. But also how low my heart rate can drop between efforts, or how high my normalized power across the whole. Say I do like a 8 by 4 minutes. I know that's about an hour, give or take.
mhm.
Um, and like how high that normalized is. But
Is
yeah,
that what you're normally doing? 8 by 4 minutes?
I'd say it starts off a bit less, like six, five or six at
Okay.
the start of the
I
year.
was
But
like,
once you
dude,
got
I
your
want to
base,
never riding with Oliver. That sounds
yeah,
I
yeah,
like that. What
that's about the limit. I've never done more than 8, but yeah.
do you stick to for VO2 max train? This is always a good question that comes up. Do you ever do like 30-15s or do you like the longer stuff?
That's my favorite session, I'd say. 30 fits, so 13 by 30, 15, so about 10 minutes. I think it is
Okay.
10 minutes actually.
Yeah.
But I also like my coach Roy gives me a session that's 4 minutes, but with a kick, 30 seconds out of the saddle at the start, 3 minutes seated, just holding onto the power, and then letting the power rise for the last 30 seconds as well. That
Mm.
one's nice because it doesn't feel as long.
Hmm. I was coached by Tom Bell, and he was probably the first guy that started giving me those hard starts, and he
Yeah.
loves those. He's like and they were good. I like mixing in like some other just like hard across the board, but I think those are also more effective like cardiac training and because your heart
Mm.
rate gets up faster. But when you're doing 30-15s, do you like to do those like fresh? Do you do those at the end of a ride, or is it just how do you look at that?
I'd say I generally do them pretty fresh. So like say an hour warm up and then yeah,
Okay.
just get into them. But I quite like throwing in like say if I got a free ride because I enjoy doing them. I quite like throwing in like a block of them. If I get to a climb that's pretty constant gradient, I'll throw in a block.
Oh, you're
But
sick,
that's
man. You
pretty
do these
rare.
on a free ride?
Yeah, but a free ride that has to have efforts. But yeah,
I love
especially
that.
like
Free
yeah,
ride, I'm going long. I'm not doing
yeah.
30-15s. You're a savage, man. So if you have a free ride, you like to ride solo, or you get in a group together? You prefer group rides, solo, mix? What's your sort of
I
go-to?
I do. I reckon solo. Yeah, I quite like to just crack on.
Yeah.
And I can stop when I want to stop, and I can ride at what pace I want to. I don't get me wrong. I love riding with my mates, and yeah, doing nice calf rides. But I quite like to do them on the easy days.
Yeah,
But yeah.
that's cool. What stage race, 1 day race? What's your preference?
Um, I'd probably say stage race. Yeah,
Okay.
I quite like getting into the back end of a stage race last couple of days. When you know everyone pretty well at that point, how everyone's going, but also like when you got that fatigue, I quite like the feeling of when you're already tired, you can almost push yourself a bit more.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, it gets to a point where you are completely finished, but yeah,
Enjoy that, man, because us amateurs don't get to experience that fatigue feeling. I've only been able to do a couple really long races like that. I did Tour of Southland in New Zealand and
yeah,
trying to think of the other one. One in Ecuador. And so it's like few and far between. You need to like day 5, you're like, oh, okay, we're doing this again. Here we go.
Yeah,
And I think, yeah, so embrace that while it's in your life for sure.
definitely.
And explain something to me. And so I know I was reading a couple blogs that people have written about you, and one was talking about Vuelta Burgos, where you were talking like, man, I was rubbing shoulders with Nibali. You know, guys were telling me watch Matteo Trenton. And what what were some of the things that do you recall things that like you had made a comment Nibali just makes everything look easy, like he's moving up and it's just like there he goes. Like what were some of the things you were picking up in that experience? I think maybe then you were 20 or 21 years old.
Yeah,
um
last year, so 21. Yeah,
21, yeah. So what was that experience like?
yeah, no, it's brilliant. Yeah, I think yeah, right in at the deep end. First pro race was Burgos, so it's like typically the warm up race for the Vuelta. So
Yeah.
there was a really good field, and definitely on UAE, the team I was riding for was just an amazing squad, really, and guys that I could really learn from. But it's just like the little things. I knew the level would be hard physically because I know that it's the top level and everything, but I think the thing that I knew I'd have to learn the quickest was just the little things. So like, yeah, just riding as a team, using the radios, going getting bottles, moving up, just simple
Mhm.
stuff. And learning the different rhythm of the race because I know it's what you watch on TV, but when you feel it in the legs and in the bunch, it's a bit harder to learn the rhythm of it and like when a break will go and when it will start being ramped up and everything. It's predictable in a way, but also pretty unpredictable too.
Totally.
Um, but yeah,
How do you feel the one thing you mentioned of riding together as a team, which how did you quickly try to gel with them? Because you, when you're with your boys and you've been racing with them for a while, you know people's body language, you know, like just how to ride together. And I always think
yeah,
back to when we did Tour Southland, actually, we were a composite team. There were 7 of us, and it's like, it was like you, the reference Bad News Bears probably doesn't mean anything to you. We look like we didn't know what the hell was going on. 2 guys are over
yeah.
here, 1 guy's over here. It was just like we are so unorganized. What do you kind of do to like gel in real quick and just vibe with these guys? Or is it just something that naturally happened for you? Or was it a struggle? Or how was that like?
Yeah, I'd say it sort of naturally happened because you are, I mean, riding with guys that are that experienced, like Trentin, Rui Costa, those guys that have been, like I've been watching on TV since I started cycling, basically, and they know what it's like to have a young guy, and they know the right
Oh,
things to
true.
say and the right things to show for me to learn. But also, it's like you you've got 30 guys in each World Tour team, give or take. Well, yeah, 30 guys max on every World Tour team. And it's typically only 7 or 8 guys at a race. So you're rarely going to be with the exact same bunch.
Mm,
But it's just a case of good leadership um,
mm.
and clear instructions that really benefit. And like with the radios and everything, if there was ever a moment that I wasn't sure of what to do, I just ask.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah.
How does, and we can, if you don't want, I, I don't always understand the trainee role. Like, how does that work? Do you have, do they see you at races and like, yo, come ride with us and like, let's test run things? Does that type of thing get set up through like your agent knows somebody and you like get how does that, the trainee role work? Because I don't think a lot of people understand that. And I don't always necessarily get that. Do you mind explaining that a little bit?
Yeah, so typically it's a case of say you've got a guy that's doing pretty well in the amateur races, that the team's pretty interested in. It's a very big commitment to go and offer, say, a 2 year contract at however much a year straight away, not knowing really what he's like in a bunch or how he gels within a team and
Hmm.
maybe not necessarily physically, because they know if you're winning races, you're physically going pretty
Yeah.
well. but how you are with all the other things, and like your relationship with teammates and your personality. And I think it gives the teams a chance to follow a rider over like the 2 months of the end of the year, the 2 months of the back end of the season, to really get a good idea of what they are and like what they're like, and then they can from there offer a contract if they've got the space for it. But
So
yeah,
it's always August 1st until the end of September.
yeah. So no
Got
stagiaires are allowed to race before August 1st, and then they'll typically do say 4 or 5 races at the end of the year.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. What do you think you've learned? You're a young guy with a lot of experience. What do you think you've learned about cycling that's made you better at it?
Um, it's tricky to pinpoint down to say like one thing, but I think there's been lessons along the way, sort of physically, mentally, and also tactically that have helped a lot. I'd say tactically, I learned a lot when I was a junior, which was the first time I went and did like the proper races abroad.
How old
Did
were
a
you
few
then?
races in Spain. So 17, 18.
Okay.
I raced for a team called HMT, which was run by Tony Barrett and Mark Barry, who are both, yeah, sort of well known within the British cycling junior races. That yeah, it was typically like the team to be on as a junior. That had the best program and everything, and from there I learned sort of the general feel of European roads and European races, and racing on closed roads and get going and getting bottles in the convoy and everything. Um, so there I learnt a lot, sort of tactically. I think mentally I learnt a lot when I was here the first year in France, where I didn't speak any French really, and it was my first time living alone and far away from home, and yeah, just putting up with going out and obviously training on the bike, but getting back and not having anyone to really speak to. So learning to be by myself essentially. And then yeah, I'd say physically, like I've learned a lot just from different sessions and how my body responds to it, and what I what I think I enjoy doing
Mhm.
physically, and yeah, that sort of thing.
I love that. Since you hit it on the physically last, what do you think is the number one thing that's gotten you to where there's obviously a lot of things, but what's something that jumps out, something that's made you as fast as you are right now?
Um, I reckon, yeah, long grippy rides and good VO2 max sessions,
Oh,
solid sessions, but like more finishing sessions, um, finishing them strong. Because then I think if you if you can finish a session strong, then it sort of you come away really happy, and then you're motivated to then go on and do something else. And it's often I often like it when a coach will set me say not crazy numbers, and then I'll come away completing it and being really happy, as opposed to being set something that's maybe just a touch too hard, and then I might crack sooner than what I would have done if I'd have been set, say, 2 intervals less.
mhm.
But yeah,
Man, I love that because I think it's. Would you agree that there's just that confidence that you get from the win at that interval session
yeah,
carries so much weight forward into your training, as opposed to just as you said, if you fail, none of us like to fail. So even though it's just
yeah,
like
yeah,
a day on the bike, it's like, ah, damn, I could not hit that today. It doesn't feel good. Like,
definitely.
do you see a big, like, does that tie into the mental strength, that confidence? Do you think that's like a big aspect of training that athletes need to like hone in on?
Oh, definitely. It's the same as I mean, it's just the just completing something that you've been set is just like it's such a good feeling, and it is like it's like one of those little goals, where it's not like the big goal. You're not winning a bike race or anything, but you're doing
Mhm.
something, and you feel like you're one step closer to getting really fit.
I
But
love
yeah,
that. I asked you that question because I had an athlete we were chatting about some things and he had just been struggling. I'm like, I think, we might just be reaching a little too far. I think we're like missing the mark here. And his comment was like, I like the struggle. I like I don't mind failing. I said, yeah, but what about when you get the W's? Doesn't that feel really
Mm,
good? And if it's still the right stimulus, like it's great to have these reach goals, but so I want to be clipping that and sending it to him because Oliver
yeah.
says you need to get the confidence from these. What's something that you're trying to improve on this year as you're kind of moving forward?
I'd say just becoming more well-rounded and not trying to focus on be like one thing. Because
Ah,
I think in the past I've wanted to be, when I came first here, I knew I was quite good at time trials in the UK, and I knew I was quite good at like long climbs. And I thought, I'll just try and be a climber. And then it never really worked out because I thought, sort of found that the lighter I got, the more unpredictable my form was, and then I just didn't, I wasn't overly happy. But then I think this year I've I started doing quite well in, like, my sprint came on really well, sort of out of nowhere. And then I sort of decided like, if I can just continue to just improve like my general sort of VO2 short climbs and that, and hold my sprint, then I think I can be a real good, well-rounded
mm,
like cyclist racer.
yeah.
But
I
yeah,
think I mean I think it just gives you a ton of options, you know? You're not
yeah, yeah,
pigeonholed into one thing. And I think it makes you a more lethal rider. You're not it's like, oh, that guy only climbs. That guy only
mm,
time trials. Like when you have a little bit of everything, it's like Philippe Gilbert. It's like, dude, you don't know what he's about to do. He's about to go win a race, though. That's for sure.
yeah,
So
yeah. That's
cool.
it.
I like that. What do you think is one of the best pieces of advice you've received over the years?
Um, that's a tricky one. I think one thing that stands out, like real racing specific, but my junior, the guy that ran my junior team, he said in a bunch, if you think you're, I can't remember exactly, but if you think you're 10th, you're 20th, and if you think you're 20th, you're 30th, and if you think you're 30th, then you're way too far back. But that's more about like position in the bunch. But that's something that actually has stuck with me across that any race really. I just sort of think, if I think I'm there, then I need to move up. Or, and if I can't see the bunch, then the front of the bunch, then I just really need to move up because position is like so important in some of the races we do. But yeah,
Would you say every race or only some of the races?
I'd say some races are a lot more relaxed than others, and there'll always be key points within a race where you'll need to be really well placed. But there's certainly differences in how stressful it is to be in the right place in the right time at the right time,
Any
with certain
any
races.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Any memories of like a time when you weren't in the right position or you would have done something differently that you remember that you've kind of replayed back, like, hey, don't let that happen again?
Yeah, definitely. I think I made the biggest mistake I think I've ever made in a bike race was 2 weeks ago at Tour of Alsace, the second stage, I think it was. I crashed quite hard on the first day, and I knew I didn't want to be too. I wanted to go fairly easy at the start of the race, but we knew it was a hard climb coming straight out of the neutral zone. It was like a 5 minute solid effort, quite steep, and I think I was about maybe a hundredth wheel, and there was a split right over the top of the climb, and a group of like 30 of us that we didn't see the front again until maybe 100K later. Full gas
Wow.
chase where, yeah, just complete real mistake not being up there, not just for the sake of 2 minutes of concentration. I lost like
Mhm.
2 hours of my race, and therefore I had no legs
Oh man.
for to anything. But yeah,
What's that like? I mean, when people are lining up, that's like the race to the race. Are
yeah,
the elder statesmen there like, yo, get out of here? Or, I mean, everybody's fighting to get in the position before the race has even started. How does that play out? I mean,
yeah. I
there's
just
got to be a
didn't.
pecking order, right? Of,
Yeah, it's normally it's normally I don't know. So you've normally got the guys that are pretty good at like moving up, and that they're normally the guys at the front, and then there'll be a zone like at the front is the place where you're a bit maybe a bit too far forward,
Mhm.
and then behind that you've got like say where the bunch fans out a bit, but that's often the place where everyone wants to be because you're not quite taking the wind and you're not, but you're still far ahead. But then because that's the place where you want to be, but just behind that, then you got the bit which people call the crash zone because that's where everyone's fighting to get into that perfect place. Um, but of course, because everyone wants to be there, and that's where all the chaos is and the crashes are. And then behind that, then you normally got like a bit more relaxed, but then you get caught up in the crashes. It's
That's where you
typically
were.
the same guys. Yeah, yeah. Well, I
I
was a
like that.
bit
That's
further back than that. But
that's a
yeah,
more blatant crash zone. I usually call it like the washing machine. It's just like chaos, like you said, but I like crash zone. It's
yeah,
just don't be
it is.
there. Oh man,
Yeah.
that's wild. What's before we jump into some nutrition things, are there any times where you felt like you weren't riding well? And I only asked that of like, how did you course correct that? What would you do if you're just like, man, I'm just not feeling good on the bike right now? What's your go-to move for that?
Yeah, I'd say it's tricky because obviously there's a lot of factors that can cause you to not be feeling quite good enough. And over the years, I've had a few different things that have caused me to not feel so good. Last year, I had a real good patch of racing where I got a lot of good results in sort of end of May, June. And then it got to July where all of a sudden I just really dropped off. Um, and there wasn't really an explanation for it other than maybe I've just been hitting it a bit too hard. But then I didn't really understand how the form could just go. Um, but I then found out that I had maybe an iron deficiency.
Oh,
So I started taking a bit of iron, and that sort of sorted things out. Um, and then before, I've also had times where I've been a bit too light. When I was here as a first year, I got down to because of the heat and when you get into the because I think because you've got so much time to ride your bike, you can afford to really do a lot. And the heat here also makes it quite hard, well, for myself personally, to maintain weight. But also the mentality of like just seeing the weight go down and down and down. It's like motivating. And I got a bit carried away, got down to 61 kilos, and then I was just, yeah, bit pretty useless. I had like one effort in me in a ride, and then I'd be on my knees basically.
wow. How much do you weigh
But
now?
yeah, about 70 kilos, 69,
Oh,
70 kilos.
wow. Wow.
Yeah,
So not, dang. That is
yeah,
huge. Holy cow.
yeah,
Okay. That's I appreciate you sharing that. That's some like good insight, especially for I think it's easy, like you said, to get carried away with that, especially when you see it happening and you're not really putting effort into it. It's like, oh, this is a good thing. And then you're like,
yeah,
oh, wait, maybe
yeah,
not. Yeah.
yeah,
What's nutrition on the bike? What's your let's break it into we'll do like long endurance rides that you like doing. Let's talk about and maybe it might be the same as like your VO2 max sessions, so like training, and then let's talk about racing. So let's do training first. What do you like to do on the bike? Are you liquid, carbs? Are you food? Just everything. And people want as much detail as possible.
yeah. Well, I'd say if I had unlimited money, I'd just go, yeah, like beta fuel, Morton, try to get my like 80 grams in an hour.
Okay.
Just go gels and bars and whatever. But I think because yeah, got to pay for these things. I think I go off of like I have a lot of panda piece, which is I don't know how to describe it really, but like the spiced bread, which is like a
Panda
loaf
piece.
of
I'm gonna look this up. I've never heard of this before.
yeah,
Panda piece.
it's like a loaf of bread, but it's basically got the same sugar to carb ratio as like beta fuel,
Okay.
which I know it's not as simple as that, but I like that. Um, Easy to pack in your pockets. Um, Eat a lot of that pain au lait, which is like little mini brioches
Okay.
with jam in. Um, And then yeah, just have a simple malto drink in the bottles. And then maybe like ISO for harder days.
Okay.
But yeah,
And, and I was gonna say, if you want to go cheap, I mean, table sugar is actually very close, like breakdown of,
yeah,
so it's like a lot of people now are just doing the DIY sugar, and
yeah.
yeah, it's surely cheaper than buying it from a big brand. But what about races?
Races, I try and go for the good stuff. So we're the team is sponsored by it's a company called Fenux,
Okay.
which is a French company. So they provide us with the sort of like the mini bars and mini gels, like little plastic gels. But they're a bit too like bit small, so they've got about 15 grams of carbs in it. And then the team let us have like on top of that we can use our own stuff. So I'll use like beta fuel sachets, maybe Morton, and then like a Nutripix gel for the last like, hour and a half.
That's so interesting that they make such tiny gels. I feel like gels are getting bigger these days. Do you have any reason,
Yeah,
any idea of why they're doing that? Like 15
not
grams
so
is like
sure.
nothing.
Yeah, it's yeah, I think that it's just what they've been doing for like however long they've been doing. So
Huh.
yeah,
Well, I'm gonna
it's
email
like
them and be like,
tradition.
guys, come on, it's carbs,
Yeah,
carbs.
yeah.
What about you into cycling tech at all? Like on the bike and whatnot?
Not too much. I think the thing that interests me is yeah, like, the only thing that really, because I don't have a choice of what I ride or what I can use, I've sort of lost the interest in it because I think then you can become frustrated with like, oh, that's faster or that
Mhm.
tests better. I think the thing that interests me the most is like just nutrition. Like that's, I suppose it's not really tech, but yeah, how it works.
Dude, it's tech for the
Yeah,
engine. I think that's the best.
yeah.
I think it's an amazing answer. I mean, I think it's, you know, yeah. I remember I went out to a race in Colorado. It's out west here, and there was an old Pro Team Dewey Solar, and this guy showed up, and he had like box rims, and this was maybe 2011. I'm dating myself, but it was back a lot. We all had like carbon wheels as race wheels, and I'm like,
Mm,
damn, this dude's, and he shredded everybody to death. And it's like this guy's on like a training bike, and he clearly had the engine that he didn't need to worry about all the tech. He was going to boss everybody that day. And I always just, I think back to that. I think the tech is great. It's important. Aero's important. But at the end of the day, if the legs and body aren't making it go super fast, it's
yeah.
not happening. So maybe that might answer the question of something overrated in cycling. What do you think is underrated? Something that people aren't doing or that you found that you're like, man, this is amazing. I can't believe more people are into this.
Um, I'd say just the ability to read a race in terms of yeah, going back to sort of road racing, but like just the ability to read a race because it's not always the guy that's got the best watts per kilo that's winning, and it always like really often that it's not that the case. There's a lot of guys that have a lot more power than their results would suggest, and vice versa. Um, yeah, and it's tricky to. It's something that doesn't come. I think for some guys it comes naturally, but I think it's also something that you can really, really work on and train on, and not necessarily have to be racing to do it. You can just watch races and sort of generally get the feel of how they are. That's really undervalued, I think.
What's a time when you've won, when you can look back and you're like, I read that race, like you made the right move at the right time, and it was probably a second nature thing that was like, yo, go now, or what? You somehow analyze something. Can you recall something off the top of your head of like just how that played out? I think an example, because that's like, I think the way you say that is really good for amateurs to hear, because now we're in the days of like, what's my FTP? What's everybody doing on Strava? I see this guy's got better watts per kg. I can't beat him. He's stronger than me. And it's like, no, dude, there's racing, there's tactics. It's more than
Yeah.
just the watts. So like, can you give a real life example of this?
Um, yeah, I'd say. it's reading the race, but then also knowing what you're good at personally. So for me
Mm.
this year, first race of the year, um, I come to the last sort of 20K of this race, and the selection's been made. We're probably in like a 15, 20 man group. And there's no one coming from behind. The winner's going to come from that group, and it's hard to tell at that time of year who the strong guys are. But I sort of had a rough idea of how comfy certain guys looked on the key climb of the race. That I sort of roughly knew who to look out for. Um, and I was one of the heavier guys that managed to get over the key climb, and probably the biggest, one of the most powerful guys in that group. And a group goes, two guys get away on there was one climb with like 10K to go, 15K to go. And then it was basically just descent to the finish. Two guys got away on that. I managed to get over the climb. Everyone's looking at each other, and I just hit it on the descent. Just went to the back, full speed on the front, and knew that if they hesitated behind, then it would be tricky for them to catch me because I was one of the bigger guys in the group. That yeah, I could play to that strength of being probably the strongest on the flat and the slight downhill. Got across to the two at the front and then just backed my sprint. I knew not I'm not necessarily a sprinter, but I knew against those two guys that I should be able to get them, and yeah, I managed to win the race. But
That's
yeah,
awesome. So when you bridged up to those two guys, did you ride with them for a little bit, or did you try and blow past them at all? Or well, when you got up to them, were you like, okay, you probably knew who they were. You're
yeah,
just we like, I'm gonna ride with them. Were you worried about the guys behind at all, or were you guys clear when you bridged up?
yeah. I'd say it was still touch and go whether we'd stay away, but I thought of sort of got in the group and I instantly said to the guys like, try to motivate them, try and be uh, talkative because I think you can get into a break and you can sort of get this if you're the one who's vocal and saying like, "Oh, come on, guys, we can do this," and just the real like cliche stuff, then you can sort of mentally trick them because I think people don't really think too clear in a race, and they'll think, "Oh, yeah, just go along with it," and yeah, we're gonna stay away and all this stuff. And even if you think, yeah, for sure it's doomed, they're gonna get caught. You can trick them into going full gas and riding harder than they probably would have done if you didn't. Yeah, just like gas them up a bit.
Yeah. Dude, I love this. You've got the mind game going, which is so crucial. You're out there playing chess, and that's really important. So
Yeah,
anytime where you feel like you didn't read the race the right way and you look back, you're like, damn, I should have done something else.
yeah. I'd say, um, yeah, there was a race this year called Tour de Cap B, Tour de 4B, which was it ended up being it was sort of a selection made in a crosswind section in the middle, and again it's like a 20 man group, um, and there's two key. So I'd say me and one other guy will say the favourites for the race. Um, and we both had teammates there. We both had three other teammates. So we had numbers to play with, and everyone's rolling around. And I wanted to miss a turn just for whatever reason. I think I was eating a bar or something, and he wouldn't. He also didn't want to ride, so we sort of bluffed each other out of the back. We're both slowly coming off the back of the group. Neither of us want to take the wheel, and I ended up. We ended up so far away that we it had to be like a full gas effort to get back up to the group, and he just went he went bang like he was obviously already feeling pretty rough. He completely out bluffed me by doing that, and in the end, I came second by not a lot at all, and I think to his teammate, and I think because I used that big effort to get back, which was like a 20 minute chase in the end.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
dang.
probably what helped them win the race, which I don't think even they realised like what how smart they were in
Yeah.
doing that. But yeah,
Ah, well, lesson learned. Won't make that
yeah,
mistake again. What races are left that you're most looking forward to this year?
yeah. So my first, so I'm going to be doing some races with Cofidis, to the end of the year. My first race is in 6 days now, the Tour of Leuven, which is a race that I watched last year, and then also when the world champs in Belgium when Alaphilippe won. I thought it was such a cool circuit, so I'm really looking forward to that. And then
I was
also, yeah,
No, sorry, go
Grand
ahead.
Prix. Well, also Grand Prix Wallonie, which is like a similar race in a
I
way
love
to
that
Germany.
race.
Yeah,
That
just
finishes in the
real.
castle, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
dude, that race is sick.
Yeah. Looking forward to those.
Is the one in so Leuven, you said I actually lived there for like 3 months,
Oh,
many
really?
years ago. Yeah. And I is it just a 1 day race?
Yep. Yeah, just
Okay.
one day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was there in the fall in maybe 2015, I want to say. So it was more like cross season, which was cool to
yeah,
see. But yeah, I missed when they had worlds there, and that would have been sick to see. But that's all
yeah,
that'll be a cool circuit. That's a cool little town. So I'll be thinking of you. I'll be looking up the results for that.
yeah.
What's this is an awkward question. I've actually kept it in because people give me weird answers. Can you finish this sentence? I never dot dot dot. And it can be bikes, life, anything.
Uh, God, that is a tricky one. I never, I never. God, crikey, that is a real tricky question.
We can skip it. It's usually people either I get that response or I get something totally off the wall. So that's why people are like keep
Yeah,
that question in. That was a weird answer that that guy gave.
yeah, that is a good question. I just can't, I can't think of an answer. Yeah,
If something pops in your head, you can blurt it out.
yeah,
What are you up to when you're not riding? So you've got some downtime, or like even I was actually like say you're in France and before you do you speak French now, actually? I'm gonna ask you that.
yeah,
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 cool.
yeah.
What are you doing when you're hanging out in France and you're not riding a bike?
Um, Not a lot really. I quite like to, yeah, just
Recover.
yeah, recover, just chill out. I'm into my coffee, but also this year I'm really into my tea. I've got quite a good, well, good coffee setup, but also a good tea setup with my little yeah teapot and all my loose leaf tea. And there's a few good tea shops in Aix as well that do some good selections. Make
So
tea, drink. Yeah.
what's the top two tea leaves that you like the most?
I quite like. I discovered oolong tea,
Ah,
which are like these little
yeah,
leaves that expand.
yeah.
And then also I've got a grilled pistachio tea, green tea as well that I really like. That's probably my favorite. Yeah.
Awesome. And how are you making coffee?
So I've got a Sage barista um I forgot the name of it now. It's like full manual Sage machine. Um and then a separate grinder. And then yeah, just standard grind my beans and do my coffee. I quite like a flat white or a cortado.
Okay. Very so
Yeah.
do you use dark roast for that type of coffee or do you like light
I
roast?
I do use dark roast, yeah, because it's got I think got a bit less caffeine if I'm right.
Yeah.
So yeah, not then I get don't get, if, I think if I get too much caffeine, then it also I don't feel quite as much of effect of it in races, and then also I get a bit too buzzed before rides.
Are you taking caffeine gels in races?
Yeah, yeah.
How many milligrams are you usually doing and how often?
I try and do a Nutripix gel. I really like. That's got 200 in. I experimented with having two of them actually, but I found it didn't really. Once you pass one, you don't get an X. It's not like you get double the
Not
effect.
double.
It's you just get you're just more likely to cramp. I think if you have two. Um, but yeah, just one of those 200 milligrams. Yeah,
End of the race, like an hour out, any specific time or just whenever
about
free time?
yeah, about an hour and a half ish. Yeah,
That's
and then
awesome.
try and not think. I think I for a little while I had that with like an hour and a half to go, and then I thought, oh, okay, I don't need to eat again. But I think you still need to save a bit of like normal gels to go to keep eating, because otherwise you get the dip. But yeah,
Totally. And it's better recovery. You will be more, I mean, eating, I love eating food, but then you have to, if you're in a stage race and where eating becomes hard, it's like, just, yeah,
yeah,
don't stop.
yeah, tricky.
What's your biggest inspiration pushing forward, Ben? I mean, you are 22 years old, you're a professional athlete in a real, every, I guess, pro sport is really hard, but cycling is a tough one. You don't always get to win. Sometimes the team's in a slump and, you have ups and downs as a rider. What's kind of like your North Star? What just keeps you going?
Um, just the ability to have like a proper full career from it, to get a solid like 10, 15 years out of the sport. I think that would be just like the absolute dream, and to be able to fully say like that was my job. Um,
Totally.
and to not be, I know there's always going to be stressful times when you say fighting for a contract, but to not have that as the story of your career. Um, of course, like winning races, that's the ultimate dream, and going on to win like huge races, classics, and that. But genuinely enjoy it.
Love that. Actually, I have two questions. Last one, what do you think for, I don't want to say the newer cyclists, but someone's going to be watching this and listening to this, and they have those same ambitions, or maybe they're not as far along as you. What do you think is the number one piece of advice that you would just, when someone's like, hey man, how do I get cracking? Want to get on a good team. I want to get to the pro level. What do you tell somebody when they ask you that?
Um, I just say learn, try and learn quickly what works for you in terms of like what sort of training and nutrition and stuff. Which is that's not the best advice really, because obviously it's the hardest part of it. But quickly learning what you respond well to, and then using that as much as you possibly can.
I think it's actually a great piece of advice because I think, especially now with the internet, there's so much information and there's so many ways to lose focus on our own plan. And so, even as amateurs, we've got this goal similar to what you're doing. And okay, you've got your goal set, I've got my goal set, but then the guy on Strava is doing something different. It's like, oh shoot,
Yeah,
should I be doing that? Or and sure, maybe look at what he's doing and maybe test it out, but maybe it doesn't work for you. And so
no, exactly.
I think that's a really good tip actually. And my last one, the easiest question: how do people keep up with you? You're on Instagram. Do you blog, Twitter,
Yeah,
Strava? We'll put the links in the show notes so people can follow along with you in the season.
yeah. So yeah, Instagram, Twitter. I think I'm the same on both. O Night 49.
Cool.
And then Strava as well. It's just my name, Oliver Knight.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll put those in. Everybody, hit up Oliver. Give him a thanks for coming on. Oliver, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate this. Everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later. See ya.